Thanks for checking this out. We're going to talk about how to EQ and other audio stuff. If you want to learn how to use a console or some kind of audio controlling DAW program, there are plenty of videos for that online. But this you can just listen to or you can watch. Recommend you listen to this or watch this with a pair of headphones on, but you may not even have to do that. Your cell phone speakers may have a hard time picking the things up that we're going to be doing, and your laptop speakers might as well. You don't need any kind of special kind of headphones, but I do recommend headphones. It doesn't matter if they're fancy or cheap, something that can give you that audio, that close-up audio sound. And there's so many sources out there that will show you how to EQ using a program. And this may even look familiar to you if you're watching the screen. It's just a really simple EQ that Adobe Audition comes with. We're just going to be using this as an example today. It might not be what your system or setup looks like if you're trying to figure this out, but it's really all about listening. So you can listen to this in the car, on a stereo. You can try it on a laptop speaker, or you can try it on your cell phone speakers. It may not work as well. And EQ is filtering out the things you don't want or adding a few things in that you do want. And there's a few ways to do that. We'll start off with what's called high pass filter. And I'm going to turn this on and my voice is going to start to change. Turn it on. Right now it's not doing much. It's cut off very gently at 20 hertz. I'm going to then slide it over, and you can hear as I start talking, as I move the filter over, it's going to make a weird kind of clicky noise as I move it and talk. But as I slide it over, my voice is going to thin out. Check 1, 2, and you can hear my voice is super thin right now. And this is high passed over at 980 hertz. This is 58, 160, 450, 1438 hertz, 3395 hertz. And what the high pass filter does is it lets highs pass. It lets all these noises right here, and it doesn't let these low noises pass. So they call it a high pass filter, and they call it maybe even rolling a high pass filter over when you do this, because usually you're turning a knob and you roll it over. Now your high pass filter has some of them have some adjustment. This is set at a 24 dB curve, and if you're watching this, you can see this slope right here. I can change that to a 48 dB curve, and that just makes the slope even steeper. It does change a little bit of the sound, but on this you might not be able to hear it. So right now I'm at 139 hertz, about 1500 hertz, 1600 hertz, and now I'm back at 100 hertz. I'm going to roll it over to 35 hertz. This is 35 hertz, and you probably don't hear much of a difference between 35 hertz and rolled over to 90 hertz because I'm not talking that low. My voice isn't that low. But when I get up to maybe 200, where's 200? There's 200. You can probably start hearing the change in my voice. I go down to like 150, a little bit of a change. But about 100, not much of a change, versus like, let's go to 1,000. Going to 1,000, that's about 1,000. Really, really thin. Sound like a bad cell phone connection, maybe? I'm not sure. So that's high pass filter. We're going to keep it at, let's say, I don't know, let's go just keep it at 100, maybe a little bit more, 130. Now, as you can probably hear, I'm not going to say anything for a second. And if you have headphones on, you can hear this. You're going to hear the room noise change. I'm not worried about other noises seeping in because it may actually help you hear what we're trying to do. So this is at 130 hertz. Now, if I turn the high pass filter off, depending on how loud you're listening to this, the room noise may actually go up. So this is the high pass filter off, and you can hear my mouse click, which actually is a good indicator of when I turn it back on. Here we go. That's the high pass filter on and off. You can actually hear more room noise come in or get louder when I turn it off. I'm using a Rode What's it called? It's the USB, Rode USB. You're gonna hear me move stuff around. That's me tapping the mic. Rode NT USB. Now, if I tap the mic with a high pass filter off, it can sound very boomy. Now, if I turn the high pass filter on, it's less boomy. Off, on, off, on. So your high pass filter can help remove a lot of low end noise that's unwanted. Most vocal mics will have high pass filter. Actually, most open microphones on a stage will have a high pass filter engaged. Even a kick drum may have a high pass filter engaged at like maybe 30 or 20-ish hertz, because there's so much low end information that you don't necessarily want, even in a kick drum or even a bass guitar. Because if your speakers are trying to process super low end stuff and also higher end stuff, and it's got to do it all at the same time, removing some of that really low end, high energy information can help clean up the way something sounds. Low end sound carries more energy. That's why the people next door to me can probably hear my voice and it probably sounds. Or if your neighbor pulls up with their car stereo booming, you hear the low end bass because that's literally more energy traveling through the air into your eardrums. All right, so that's high pass. You can also do a low pass filter, which is the opposite. I'm going to turn that on. You probably won't hear anything when I cut this on. But low pass filter does the opposite. Now, when I start talking, you start losing high end information. When I start talking, you start losing high end information. So this is with it off, on, and now I'm going to roll it over to, let's go to 15,000. Oh, let's go to 6,000. Sorry, 6,500. Going down to 3,700, 1,600. When I start going much lower than 1,900, it's going to start sounding really muffly. This is 321. That was 321. And if you're watching this, I'm going to turn the high pass filter off. Going back for a second. So we can have the full range of the input. So this is with it essentially turned off. I'm going to go down to 1,000. This is 1,000. So I'm going to go to 100. Not sure you could have heard me. If you had a sub, you might have heard a little. That's high pass. And this might be useful if you have open mics on stage that are picking up a lot of brass noise. See, I can roll this down to, let's keep going. Check 1, 2, roll this down to, I don't know, 8,000. It starts affecting the way I sound, at least in my headphones, depending on what you're listening to, but I have around 10,000. And I still sound pretty normal. I'm going to turn it on the high pass now. And I have this swath cut out that starts at like 83 hertz. I'm going to roll this over even more to like 100. Starts at 83 hertz and then it chops off around 10,000. And my voice still sounds pretty normal. I'm going to keep coming down a little bit on the low pass filter. So that's 6,000. It's starting to sound a little weird. 5,000, a little more weird. But if you have a live mic on stage and you're just getting a lot of high-end information like brass, cymbals, the PA bleeding back into your mics, you can put a high pass, low pass, and cut some of that unwanted information out. It may even help with feeding back and ringing if you're getting a lot of really, really high-pitched feedback. So that's high pass and low pass. And I can change the curve on this one too if you're watching. Right now it's at 24 dB curve. I'm going to go to 48. And now it's like a really harsh drop off. You're probably not going to hear much of a difference between a 48 dB curve and a 24 dB curve. Maybe a 6 dB curve. Yeah, 6 dB curve is super gentle. So this is a 6 dB curve at 10,000. I'm going to roll a 6 dB curve down to 3,000. And I still sound generally normal, not too weird. My low pass is at 3,293. And if I change the dB curve to 48, it's going to chop my voice off pretty bad. So here we go. 3, 2, 1. And now that's a 24 dB curve. So that's a big difference between a 6 dB curve versus a, here we go, 48 dB curve. So depending on what you're using, console or DAW, your dB curve can change the way things sound drastically. There's not much of a difference between a 24 and a 48 in this instance, but 6 is quite a bit. If I go down to my high pass filter, change that to a 6, that probably might not sound any different versus a 48. But it's worth playing around with and seeing how changing these parameters changes your sound. I'm going to keep it on 24. Actually, I'm going to go to 48. Here we go. This is just a talking voice, but these concepts can translate to any open microphone on a stage or in a studio. All right, now we're going to grab a band and we're just going to move it around. When I say a band, we have these. This one has 5 bands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, some consoles have 3 or 4. Some of them just have 1, and you can sweep them, meaning I can grab a band. I'm going to turn a band up, EQ band, and turn it up. And this is the low end, and things are going to really boomy. And I can sweep all the way up to the high stuff, high information. And so this is at, where I'm looking at, this is at 7,600 hertz. Let's go in the middle, well, the middle of what I'm looking at, sorry. This is 1,000 hertz. You can hear the air change as well. This is around 250, 260. And this is like 150, 140, 150. There's 150. I'm just going to slide it back and forth and just listen to the air, how it changes. So that's called sweeping. I'm going to find some what you call mud. This is what you might call mud. And I'm kind of intentionally talking a little bit lower to make that mud a little bit more pronounced. And now I'm going to change this back down to no change at all. Change it back down to 0. So that's really close to 0. That's 0.3 dB difference. Yeah, that's 0. And that doesn't sound bad, at least on my headphones. I don't know how your headphones sound, but we're not really going for like that pristine quality. We're just listening for changes. So if I were doing this, I may cut this just a little bit. When I say cut, I'm going to find that really low mud, and I'm going to exaggerate this. I'm going to cut it. And now it probably sounds kind of like my voice got thinner. That's a drastic cut. That's a lot. It's as much as this EQ will do on this program, at least at this setting. So I'm grabbing this muddy frequency, which is in this case around 150, and I'm turning 150 or close to. I'm kind of floating around a little bit between 150 and 180. I'm turning it down. So now I'm at 158, 160, and I have cut 8.5 dB. Put that back to 0. Now you can generally hear a 3 dB difference when audio changes. That means if you're listening to anything and it goes up or down by 3 decibels, you should be able to hear a change. So I'm going to go to I'm going to grab a different band. I'm going to go to 1,000. I'm going to turn it up 1,000 with 3 dB. I'm not going to say anything. This is 0. I'm going to turn it up 3 dB. That's a 3 dB difference at 1,000 hertz. 1,000 hertz is boosted about 3 dB. I'm going to change it to 6 dB. So that is 1,000 hertz boosted 6 dB. I'm going to go up another 3 dB to 9. That's 1,000 hertz, very close, sorry, 996 hertz and 9 dB boost. I can change it to 1,000, ready, 1,000. There, now it's perfectly on 1,000. And then I'm going to go up again, 1,000 hertz at 15 dB boost. So it's starting to sound really, really wonky right now. And that's about as high as I can go in this state. I'll change it back down to 0. All right, now I'm going to do that was a boost. Now I'm going to do cuts. I'm going to do a -3 dB cut at 1000 hertz. That's -3. Probably not a huge change. Let's go -6. -6 dB at 1000. Again, maybe not a huge change, but voice starts to sound a little less detail. Let's go -9 at 1000. Now probably sounding more muddy. What's interesting is you cut out 1000 hertz, that mud that we were looking at earlier at around 150 starts to sound more pronounced. And so do my S's. All right, let's go down to -12. That's -12 dB. Sorry, -12 dB at 1000 hertz. And then -15. That's -15. It almost sounds like almost, at least in my headphones, like that really warm radio voice that people shoot for. I'm not saying it sounds like it should, but it's a little closer. But it sounds a little weird, at least in my headphones. I'm not going to even tell you what headphones I'm using because it doesn't matter. This is really just about listening for changes. So that's 1000 hertz reduced by 15 dB. I'm going to change it back to 0. So no change. So that's no change at all. Now, I'm going to go to fourth band. I'm going to change it to 3.5 or 3500 hertz. The human ear is really sensitive around this area. And I'm going to boost it by 3 dB. So that's a 3 dB boost at 3500 hertz. The human ear is really tuned in to hear this frequency. So that's a 3 dB boost. Let's go to 6. 6 dB boost. 9 dB boost. 9 dB. It's a 9 dB boost. A voice has more detail, but it might not be desirable. Might be a little bit too much. And 12. If you have sensitive ears, this may start to bother you. It's a 12 dB boost. And let's go to 15. 15 dB boost at 3500. So now, like, it's pretty spicy. This would be, if this was on a stage, it'd be feeding back probably pretty bad. All right, 0. So right now, other than a high pass set to 113 hertz and a low pass set to around 12,000 or 1,200, sorry, 12,343 hertz, it's completely flat. I'm going to grab a band and I'm going to just cut 500 aggressively. That's 500 cut all the way. That'll go. Move it and boost at 500. This is 500. So you can hear 500 has a really, what you might call boxy sound, or it sounds like a trumpet almost. I go down to 200, start getting into mud, and then I sweep to 1000. And this is honky, maybe. It sounds like an old-timey phone call. And then 3000, 4000. And then this is 10,000 boosted really, really strongly. So I'm going to sweep down with this. So 10,000, 8,000, 6, 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, 900, 700, 600, 500, 400, 300, 200, and around 100. And flat back to 0. I'm going to add just a little cut in here, around 3. I don't know. Let's see. Check. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Maybe there. Let's just do that. Just a little bit. So a 3 dB difference, -3. I'm going to do -3 at around 300 hertz. Can do quite a bit. So sometimes if you're having a hard time hearing detail, you don't need to necessarily boost the highs. You might just need to remove some of the low end mud. All right, I have a little cut here at 310, and then there's a little there's another thing called a Q. That changes the shape of your EQ curve. Depending on what you're using, you can have a knob that may adjust your Q curve. So I'm going to go to 2000. I'm going to boost it. Check 1, 2, check 1, 2, check 1, 2. That's right around 2000. Boosted by like 12 dB. And I'm going to change the Q width. I'm going to change it to 1. Now it's going to make it wider. Change the EQ to 1, and that makes my EQ curve wider. I'm going to change it to, let's see, 0.2. Let's do 0.5. So it should get even wider. So that's a really wide EQ curve. It's grabbing a whole big swath now. Even though it's set to 2000, it's grabbing close from 300 all the way to, 10,000. It's grabbing a huge chunk. It's peaking at 2000. Like the peak of the hill is at 2000, but it's grabbing a whole lot. Let's change it to, let's see, 0.2. Now it's just brought everything up. It grabbed almost everything and brought it up. So let's go back to 2. 2 seems to be default. So that's 2. Back at 2. 2 is kind of a default. Depending on what you're using, you may not have an option to change your Q curve. Or sometimes it'll have like an option between like different shapes as well. So you may have you may have like a steep ramp, and then the top of the hill may be kind of flattened out a little bit more and a steep ramp down, or you may have a shallow ramp and a really sharp peak that comes down, so you can change the shape of the curve depending on what you're using. But for right now, we're just going to change its width. Now if I go the other direction, let's go to 3, EQ curve, a Q curve. My EQ curve Q is 3, right? Here we go, 3. So that's 3. I'm going to boost it a little bit more. I'm going to change it to 15 so we can really hear this. So it's 2000 hertz boosted by 15 dB with a Q curve of 3. Let's change it to 4. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. We'll go a little more aggressive. Let's go to like 10. So that's a really sharp spike. And you may not actually be able to hear it, but I'm going to move this EQ around. And you'll probably hear it sweep back and forth. So this is an EQ at a Q curve of 10, around 160, 200, 300, 500-ish, 700, 900, 1400, 2200, 23, 3800, 5900, around 10,000, 12,000. So if I move it back and forth, you can hear sounds like someone's sweeping a radio station, an old radio. All right, put that back down to 0. I'm going to change everything to 0 and put everything back as it should. You have EQ, you have high pass, which kind of chops off all your low end information depending on where you sweep it. So here's my high pass set to 20 hertz, and here it is at 1000. Put it back around 120-ish. Then you have low pass, which lets low information pass. This is with it off. This is with it at 4000-ish, 4200, and that's around 1300. I think I had it around 12. Then you have EQ sweeps, or EQ, which you can grab and boost. So this is 2000 hertz boosted by almost 14 dB. And then you can sweep and listen to the way sound changes. Now, when you're EQing, you make things louder or quieter. So this may sound weird, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. Usually you sweep and you find something you don't like. I'm not a big fan of that with these headphones, that noise, that kind of sound. So I'm going to take that, which is around 1000 hertz, and I'm going to then cut a little bit, like 4 dB at 1000 hertz. It does sound a little bit different, but now I'm going to turn it off. I'm going to turn off this little cut at 1,000 hertz at a Q of 2. I'm going to turn it back, put it back to 0. And that's it back at 0. I'm not sure this sounds better than this. And that's 1,000 hertz cut by now around 6 dB. And now no change, no cut at all. So I don't know if this 6 dB reduction at 1,000 hertz sounds better than this, which is like no dB reduction at 1,000 hertz. I don't think either one's actually wrong. I think depending on the situation, either one could work. And even depending on your headphones, you might think, wow, that sounds horrible when you cut it, or it sounds horrible when you add it back in. The idea is you're just listening for changes, getting your ears used to the changes when you change EQ. You can look up tons of other videos to figure out how to actually dive into a program or a console to change EQ. This is really just about listening for a sweep like this, sweeping back and forth between the highs and the lows. And it's also listening for the changes in a Q curve. That's a 2 to a 10, which will sound different as you sweep or reduce. But hope this helped. Thanks for checking it out.